Hi, everyone. My name is Tiana Lyons King, and I am CAM's Senior Manager of Engagement and Programs. Today, I'm going to go over a few housekeeping items before we get started. First things first, we are recording this webinar. It will be posted to CAM's YouTube following the presentation for the enjoyment of the greater CAM community and the public. You will also be emailed the link for the YouTube once it is ready for distribution. We are not providing any captioning today, but if that is a request of yours, please let CAM staff know and we'll be able to turn on our Zoom captioning. Um, and then I'm also just going to go over a few housekeeping as it relates to our chat and our questions for today. You are welcome to use the chat box and our Q&A option down at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, please use the Q&A. The option there is you can have an anonymous option, excuse me, you can post an anonymous question, or you can upvote the question if you see one that's really important to the topic that we're talking about today. And you also be able to post anonymously as previously expressed. Apologies, y'all, I need to slow down a little bit. I just had a sip of water. Um, 1 second here. Apologies, I'm having a few tech issues here. Give me one moment. As we begin today's event, we'd like to acknowledge and honor the original inhabitants of our various regions. California is home to over 150 tribes, and an acknowledgement is just one step towards working with Native communities to build meaningful relationships. Museums and many institutions were founded upon purposeful exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples and still benefit from settler colonialism and associated harms. CAM is committed to moving beyond land acknowledgements and into action. We encourage all participants to learn about the land they live on and work on, to build relationships with local Native communities, and to find tangible ways to celebrate, support, and advocate alongside them. We invite you to learn more about the original stewards of your area. Some helpful but not definitive resources include the State of California's Native American Heritage Commission and the Native Land Digital Archive. Links will be available in the chat for both those resources. I'll pop them in shortly for you all. Today's presenters will be talking, and I will be in the background. So if you have any questions, any technical issues, you can shoot me a message in the chat box, or you can send me an email at engagement@calmuseums.org. I'll put my email in the chat box for your reference as well. I'm going to go ahead and put myself off of camera and hand it over to Shanti and Val.
Thank you, Tiana. I'm going to begin sharing my screen. Can everybody see my screen okay? Val, can you see my screen?
Yes, I can. Thank you.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Shanti Nagwani. I work as the exhibitions manager at the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History, otherwise known as the MA, and I'm responsible for designing and installing the exhibitions here, as well as taking care of the Kincentricity Garden. And I'm honored to present today with Valentin Lopez. Valentin, you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, my name again is Valentin Lopez, and I'm the former chairman of the Amah Mutsun tribal band. Our tribe is comprised of the descendants that were taken to Mission San Juan Bautista and Santa Cruz.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So, as Valentin said, the Amah Mutsun is comprised of the descendants of the indigenous people taken to missions Santa Cruz and San Juan Bautista during Spanish colonization of the Central Coast, and is today working hard to restore traditional stewardship practices on these lands and heal from historical trauma. Valentin, will you tell us a little bit about the Amah Mutsun?
Okay. Well, I always like to start with our creation story. Our creation story starts at Mount Umunhum, and Mount Umunhum translates to place of the hummingbird. And people also translate it to the resting place of the hummingbird. And that right there was the tallest peak in the Santa Cruz Mountains. And there, our creation story can take days to tell, so I won't uh, give you that version. I'll give you a very short version of our creation story. Our creation story, what's most important about our creation story is that Creator clearly defined our tribal boundaries, and this right here is pretty much all the tribes that are today known as Ohlone. I don't use the term Ohlone. The Ohlone, the tribe that was at Pescadero along the coast, was the Ohlone tribe, Oljon, and the Spanish referred to them as Ohlone. And somehow that got defined as everyone in the greater San Francisco and Monterey Bays. But our creation story so defines our territory, and then Creator very specifically gave our people the responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. And that's what led to our developing the traditional ecological knowledge or traditional indigenous knowledge of how to take care of Mother Earth, how to use fire as a tool, how to harvest sustainably, how to restore sacredness of the lands, and how to take care of the waters and the mountains, and our food plants, our food resources, medicine plants, etc. The most important part of stewardship is maintaining and or restoring sacredness to the lands. We recognize plants as relatives. We recognize fire as a gift from Creator. We recognize all plants as a gift from Creator. When I use the term relatives, the mountains, the air, the clouds, the wind, the plants and the trees, they're all relatives in the sense that they have the same mother and the same father we do. Father is Creator. Creator made all things. And therefore, we have the same father as the frogs and the bears. Our mother is Mother Earth. Mother Earth nourishes us and provides for us and takes care of that. So we have the same mother as all things. So that's why we look at them as relatives. And that's where the word concentricity comes from. And I'll let Shanti take it from there.
Thank you. The Amah Mutsun Land Trust is an organization by which the Amah Mutsun access, protect, and steward lands that are integral to our identity and culture. Through the Moz partnership with AMLT, the Kincentricity Garden was made possible. So what is Kincentricity? Kincentricity is a foundational Indigenous view that all things, plants, animals, earth, air, and water, are interconnected as one family, like Valentin said, and as such, we are to care for them. In the Moz Kincentricity Garden, we have this sign that tells visitors about the project. And part of the sign is what I want to read to you today. It says, "We hope the Moz Kincentricity Garden will invite you to be curious about native plants, honor Indigenous wisdom, and support the many efforts of the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. Perhaps it will encourage you to create your own kinship garden in your backyard or shared space. We can imagine Kincentricity gardens throughout our community as a way to learn and grow together." And as we're presenting today with the CAM conference, we're hoping that, not only in your personal garden, but maybe at your own institution, you would be able to implement a native garden of your own in partnership with your community. So I will introduce you to the museum space. The MA is the county's largest museum and a central cultural gathering place in downtown Santa Cruz. The MA's mission is to build community, connection, and belonging through sharing the art and history of Santa Cruz County. And right next to the museum is Abbott Square, pictured in the bottom left, which is a public plaza with restaurants, bars, and it's where parties, events, and gathering happen. And the garden is located between the Ma and Abbott Square in a public outdoor courtyard. And here is an aerial view of Santa Cruz so you can see where the Ma is located. Along the San Lorenzo River and between the Santa Cruz Mountains and the Pacific Ocean is the museum's garden space, which is primarily positioned to be an oasis for pollinators in downtown Santa Cruz. So as you can see, we're right by the river ecosystem between the oceans and the mountains, which makes this a really great location for us to provide a space for pollinators to thrive. And let's talk about how it started. In the pandemic, the museum was closed for a year, And conversations were being had between the MA's Deputy Director Marla Novo, Valentin, and Rick Flores of the UC Santa Cruz Arboretum on how we can use the MA's outdoor spaces to connect people. They thought that the area outside of the museum could be a good place to teach kinship or kincentricity and be a place for education and connection. So, how this was started in its implementation, in fall of 2023, the plants were planted in the Ma's back garden. Yes, Valentin.
Yeah, let me interject here. In those early conversations and stuff like that, they talked about putting a garden there. And at that time, there was a lot of in the news about the monarch butterfly um, being at risk and under threat because there weren't enough resources or food for the butterfly. And it was a pretty distressed situation for the butterfly. And so we thought it would be appropriate to put a concentricity garden there, one that that focused on pollinators. And that's how that theme came through.
Thank you. And to that note, I'll share with you all that a priority in choosing the plants for this garden was to find native plants that invited the pollinators, the hummingbirds, the butterflies, etc., to this garden so that this garden could be a place for them. So the plants that went into the Moss Concentricity Garden were developed by the Amah Mutsun Land Trust and the UCSC Arboretum and other local collaborators. We wanted to find plants that were as native to this ecosystem as possible, plants that were food plants and not medicine plants. And I'll have Valentin tell you a little bit more about that. And really the goal is to, make this a place of learning and make this a welcoming place for the pollinators in the area. Valentin, do you want to share a little bit about how the plants were selected?
Well, you mentioned medicine plants. It's important that we did not include medicine plants here. Medicine plants can are important for healing, etc. But medicine plants can also cause harm, and so we had to, we want to be careful with that. We don't want to. Our tribe will not share information on medicine plants because it is a threat, or it can be harmful. And we have an example in our tribe where we have a medicine plant that can cause a person who's pregnant to lose the baby. And that actually happened to one of our members. She was drinking tea with this particular medicine plant, and she lost the baby due to that, and she was unaware of how dangerous that it could be to use that plant as medicines at that time. And so we said, so we wanted to provide a focus on food to show the variety of diets that our members had. In our tribe, we have well over 100 plants that we used annually and seasonally as food plants. And so the garden is an opportunity to show that variety as well.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Before I change the slide, I'm going to point out two things in the picture. So you'll see this redwood burl that we placed as an architectural feature in the garden, but it was actually reclaimed from somebody's home property after the CZU fires that swept through Santa Cruz in 2020. And now it acts as a bird bath when the burl fills up with rainwater. It acts as protection for the ferns underneath to prevent, trampling in this public space. And then I also want to point out the plant that is growing just to the right of the redwood burl. That's a cow parsnip, and that same plant will show up sometime later in this presentation. So here's some photos of the garden going into place. We removed all of our existing landscaping and we added new soil and new mulch and prepared both the backspace and the Ma's front garden space as well for the Kincentricity garden. And here's how it's going. We are more than 2 years, almost 3 years into this garden, and we have seen so much growth. The garden is home to a well-established family of healthy perennials and annuals that reseed and germinate naturally each year. Tall plants like the bee plant, cow parsnip, and calistegia plants have grown to heights between 6 and 10 feet tall. So on the top right, you'll see a picture of me with the bee plant. The bee plant grew to 12 feet tall that year. And the bee plant is a favorite of not only bees, but the junco birds that like to nest at the base of the plants. And at the top, we have the honeysuckle flower, clarkia flower, and tidy tip flowers. And the pollinators came. It's working so far. The garden now welcomes many pollinators, including hummingbirds, bees, ladybugs, butterflies, and more. Native berries, flowers, and seeds provide a variety of food sources. A family of junco birds have built a nest in the garden for 2 years in a row. Now they're on their third year. So every year, a family of junco birds returns to the garden, makes a nest, and starts a family. You can see one of these nests that they build on the ground featured in the bottom left. We have a photo of the bee plant and then a couple of the native berries we have growing in the garden. So there's native grapes, there's honeysuckle berries, strawberries, and here you can see a hummingbird pollinating one of the verbena plants, which is a hard moment to capture. They're really fast, but it was really beautiful to see that the hummingbird came to the garden. And the Mutsun word for hummingbird is humunya. So, from a museum standpoint, I want to share with you some of the logistics in making this garden possible. So, what we needed in order to have a successful garden was to learn about the plants, understand the design, make adjustments, and foster relationships with volunteers and colleagues. Um, it was important that we treated this garden as, a long-term project and an everlasting, evergreen responsibility that we have here at the museum. Unlike an exhibition that comes up once, this garden is here to stay. And so as we're planning the garden and planning who can take care of the garden, it was important that we understood that this garden will always need care and how we can implement that care into the future. Yes, Valentin.
That's a very important part of the garden. We recognize them as relatives and stuff like that. You think of a baby, you don't have a baby for 1 or 2 years and then get rid of it, and that's the way it would be with the plant. So if you make a commitment to have a native garden with our relatives, that garden must be taken care of until the last sunrise.
Thank you.
Mhm.
So a big part of what goes into the care of our garden here at the museum is we're in downtown Santa Cruz. We get a lot of foot traffic, and the way that people interact with the garden really affects the way that we design and continue the garden's design in the future. So if there are certain areas that see lots of trampling or certain areas where I notice that pollinators are nesting more, every year when it comes time to make adjustments to the planting, those are things that we're considering for our space. Our main challenge is litter. So we pick up trash every day. Trampling of the plants, occasional vandalism, all of these things happen in a public space. But thanks to the museum staff really caring about this garden, we're able to keep it up. And 3 years later, it's looking great. So now I want to share with you all about how this garden has been used in programming, education, and exhibitions at the museum. So in addition to it being a beautiful garden that people can visit anytime publicly and appreciate, we've been able to celebrate this garden in a number of ways. So in 2024, we had a opening ceremony for the garden hosted by Valentin Lopez. And Valentin, will you share a little bit about what that day was like?
Yes, we had a ceremonial circle where we talked about the importance of the garden, the purpose of the garden. We asked for prayers to Creator and all people to take care of the garden. We asked for health for the pollinators. A lot of prayers were offered during this time. We do have a female singer group, and they offered songs. All our songs are prayer songs, so they offered prayer songs for the garden, and also to give thanks to the people at the mall for their recognizing the importance of native plants. Also joining us was a group of Aztec dancers who you see on the right here, as this is not only important to the Amah Mutsun, this is important to all Indigenous people through the Americas and throughout the world. Thank you.
Thank you. So field trips to the Kincentricity Garden show students something that some of them may have not seen before, what a truly native garden can actually look like. So in addition to the museum offering exhibitions, we also have an educational program that welcomes students from all over the county and all over California to come for school tours. And as part of the school tours, the students are invited to come out to the garden, learn a little bit about the plants. And what's so special about that is throughout the school year, they're seeing the garden in so many different stages. And unlike a, evergreen English style garden, they're seeing that native plants go through phases. So in the summer, they set their seed and plants can look brown and a little more sparse. In the winter, they're seeing dormant plants, so a lot of more empty space. And then in the spring, they're seeing these plants really explode with life. And all of these things happen naturally. The plants know how to thrive in this ecosystem. We watered them initially when they were starting, but now they have very minimal water because these plants are designed to be, or these plants have evolved to be drought tolerant. So it's an amazing educational tool for students as well to come out and see the life cycle of these plants every single year.
They develop very deep root systems, and that's
Mhm.
why they don't need to be irrigated year round. The root systems, and some of them are grasslands and stuff like that. The root systems can go down 12, 15 feet, and that's pretty amazing.
So we've also implemented the garden in our exhibitions here at the museum. Specifically, we had an exhibition recently called Honoring Our Relatives, Amah Mutsun Botanical Illustrations, where we had the pleasure of partnering with the Amah Mutsun Tribal Band and many other wonderful collaborators in the Santa Cruz community to showcase an exhibition of drawings, paintings, embroidery, different art pieces that represent the native plants of this area. And it was from the cataloging and the knowledge passed down by Ascension Solorzano, who was the last speaker of the Mutsun language. We are able to understand and really know the cultural uses for these plants. So this exhibition was a celebration of, the knowledge that we still have to this day of how these plants were used historically and how we can continue honoring those relatives to this day. And in addition to the illustrations, the drawings, there was a native plant guide that was released and is accessible to the public. And it has the cultural uses for these plants as well as many of the Mutsun names for these plants. But as it pertains to the garden in particular, if you look in the back of the room, you can see that really large brown kind of umbrella shaped stalk. That is the cow parsnip that I referred to earlier. Every year they can grow up to 10 feet tall, and then those beautiful inflorescences go to seed. And after they went to seed, I held on to them as a sculptural element for this exhibition. And the corner of the gallery that you're seeing in the back is where we talk about the Kincentricity garden in this exhibition. And all of the plants that are featured in illustrations on the wall in that area are plants that were actively growing downstairs in the Kincentricity garden. So not only could we celebrate these plants with the public and tell them about these cultural uses, but people could actually go downstairs after the exhibition and see these plants in person. In addition to this, I harvested some flowers and leaves of different colors and textures from the Kincentricity garden, and I pressed them into these plexiglass slides so that after people look at the exhibition and see all of these botanical illustrations, they can come outside and make their own. So this is a photo of the botanical illustration station where people are allowed to grab these slides and refer to them so that they can get a little closer to these specimens, understand the makeup of these plants, and feel more connected to these relatives. And on the left-hand side, you can see a better photo of that cow parsnip bouquet that we had on display. And looking forward, like we said, the garden is here to stay. And every year we're looking at the patterns of growth, we're watching how people interact with the plants, and we're looking inwards as an organization to see how we can continue to support and celebrate this project. So I'm looking at the design of the garden based on people's interactions, based on the success of different plants in different areas. We recently received new labels in partnership with UC Santa Cruz that have a lot of the Mutsun names for the plants on them that we've been able to put out in the garden. So we have these garden stakes that tell people a little bit more about the plants. And I'm continuing to work with the Ma's educational team so that we can always bring the students, bring the children out into the garden and make sure that they stay curious and learn a little bit more about these plants while they visit the museum. So here's where I tell you that you can do this. You can make your own garden at home or at your own museum or institution, and I highly encourage you to. Here are some things that you need. You need to first and foremost partner with your Indigenous community leaders. So figure out who is in your area that you can reach out to and ask for advice or collaboration on a partnership to bring native plants to your area. Who are some experienced collaborators that you can look to for support? The museum definitely didn't do this alone, and I encourage you to reach out and find your community. You also need a designated staff member and a modest budget. So, who can take responsibility for the garden's care? And I don't mean this to say that you need to hire a garden specialist. In the museum's case, I was working as a preparator at the time, so I was somebody responsible for installing the art exhibits. And when I heard about this garden project, I volunteered and I asked for the responsibility of caring for this garden because I knew it would be a long-term project and I felt like I was up to it. So by having somebody designated to make sure that the garden is being cared for, we had a lot more success in that way. So, you can find someone in your organization who feels passionate about caring for the space as well. And that way, you know that you have it taken care of. And then finally, you need a design and a plan. So if your garden steward is no longer responsible for the project, how will you know what the garden needs? It's important to keep track of, the progress of your garden, any contacts, volunteer information. Start a folder and keep track of all of the upkeep of this garden and everything that you've done over the course of its lifespan so that anybody can jump in and support you as well. And now I'd like to point you to these two resources that I wanted to share today. One of them is for the Amah Mutsun Native Plant Guide. So if you follow this link, take a photo. This is where the plant guide lives that I mentioned earlier that we debuted as part of the exhibition recently. This native plant guide is a fabulous resource. It's like a digital flip book that has scans of the artwork that was in the exhibition, as well as more detailed cultural knowledge, cultural uses of the plants that were featured. And then if you want to support the garden and learn a little bit more about it, you can go to the santacruzma.org website and you can donate for the upkeep of the garden, or you can just learn a little bit more about Kincentricity. Is there anything else that you'd like to share before we open up for Q&A, Valentin?
No, I believe you presented exactly what we wanted to, so thank you.
Thank you. And now I would like to open it up for questions. Does anybody have any questions? Let's see, we have a question. How do you work with the city or others who maintain the physical space to ensure that no pesticides are used in the area? There is increasing evidence that all of these pesticides are dangerous for pollinators. So at the museum, we are responsible for the space, but we do share this location with the Abbott Square Market. And in the past, we have had experiences, especially when the garden was new, of, things getting dumped in the garden, like ice from the ice machine at the end of the night, or some leftover coffee from, from the baristas dumping out the pot. And that has just been a matter of communicating with my fellow colleagues at Abbott Square. So I've met personally with a lot of the people who work there, just ensuring that this is a space for the pollinators. We don't want anything dumped here. So it's really up to the museum to maintain the space, and it's up to me to communicate that with our collaborators. So there's no pesticides. We do have a landscaping service that comes through as well. And I don't believe that they're hired by the museum. I think they might actually be hired by Abbott Square. So that's been another instance in which I have just gone out personally to communicate with the gentleman with the leaf blower to say, thank you. Please don't pull any plants from this area because, some of the native plants, when they go to seed, they can look like weeds and maybe look like they're not supposed to be there. And that's a really common issue is, people assuming this plant needs to come out because it's not green and pretty right now. And that has, just been dozens of individual conversations with people, ensuring them that we love this space and are taking good care of it, and that they can leave it as is. Does anybody have any other questions? Someone asked, where is the best resources for reaching out to Ohon peoples to partner on urban native garden spaces? Valentin, do you have an answer for that? And also, are
Well,
you able to see the Q&A feature?
yes, I am.
Okay.
The that the native plant guide is the best place, and then you can contact the Amah Mutsun at info.amlt.org, and and ask a question, and they will respond to you. So that's a good way to get started. Um, uh, our our position, though, is that we cannot speak about any other tribe's territory and such. So we can provide information on how AMLT approaches things, um, but we can't talk about tribes from other locations in the state. And sometimes it's not going to be easy contacting those the other tribes. The other tribes may not be interested in a relationship or interested in pursuing this, and that makes it difficult. So just talk to them and see if there's other people in the community that they would be okay with you talking to and consulting with. And once you get their approval, they may refer you to a non-federally recognized tribe member living in their area as being that person, or someone from the university or something like that.
Question from Jennifer. It says, do you have people who attempt to collect cuttings for their personal usage? And is this space monitored all day long? The space is not monitored all day long. It's a public free use courtyard space, which brings so many challenges. So people are unattended often. The space is right outside of a bar. So I haven't seen anybody taking any cuttings for personal usage, which is great. I would be happy if people were curious about the garden, and if someone was out there taking cuttings, that would be a great opportunity for me to go out and, talk with them about the space. But luckily, no, we haven't seen that. Asks, I'm helping to create a garden behind the school where I work, and we're hoping to grow native plants with potentially a fundraising aspect. Do you have any advice about how to do that? Are you selling anything being grown in the Ma garden? So I'll answer, and then Valentin, if you have anything to add, please do.
Mhm.
So do you have any advice on how to start a native plant garden? Are you selling anything being grown in the Ma garden? So the Ma is not selling any of our plants. We partnered for the plants themselves. We partnered with the California Native Plant Society, the Arboretum at UC Santa Cruz, and Rick Flores primarily, who is also working with the Amah Mutsun relearning program. And we partnered with the Amah Mutsun Land Trust. So I think it's really a matter of figuring out which resources are in your community, like who are your native nurseries, who are the native plant experts in your area, and then also who are the Indigenous leaders and Indigenous communities in your area. Start a conversation with them and ask for advice. Say, hey, where can I start? Are there any plants that you think anybody can donate? And, from there, make sure that you have someone else to lean on and you're not doing it by yourself.
What comes to mind to me here is that it's important that the seeds be locally sourced. We have For these kind of plants, we say that we have a 10-mile radius that we want the seeds collected from. We don't want to go down to Home Depot and buy plants, from there because we have no idea where they're from. So it's important that they be locally sourced, and we use 10 miles as the outermost boundary for the seed collection.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question. Have you been able to relate the native garden to other art exhibitions at the museum? I work at a university art museum and I'm trying to get a native garden approved in our area and it has not necessarily been easy. I'm hoping that relating it to our contemporary artwork might help. So there's a lot of avenues you can explore for this. We first, more most primarily related it to the honoring our relatives exhibition because that connection was so strong. But I, with the educational team here at the museum, have developed coloring pages, scavenger hunts, native plant booklets that we've published and put out at the front desk as well, so that we always have material available to help connect people to the garden. But there's a lot of opportunity here, especially if you're intersecting art and gardening. There's opportunities for programming, where you could invite artists to the garden to draw some of the plants. You could work with your social media team to, discuss the individual plants and maybe like pair them with a piece of artwork. Once the garden is in place, there's opportunities for all kinds of programming. We have a lot of rentals here at the museum, and the garden has been a big draw for people to want to rent the space for weddings and special events because the garden is so beautiful. So I think it just depends on what the priorities of your organization are, and try to fit the garden into those priorities based on who you're talking to, because I think that there's a lot of value in having a garden in a space, and people don't necessarily know that they appreciate it until they have it. So that's what I have to say.
I would add that we have other gardens as well. We have at the Arboretum, they have a 55-acre Amah Mutsun relearning garden there. And that right there is pretty much in the natural state there. And our tribe works with the university to maintain um, that relearning. We call it relearning garden. That was the first garden we established in 2009, and that was a purpose for us to relearn the knowledge of plants, and that's where we started our relearning at. Then we have a garden at Pie Ranch, which is about 25 miles north of UC Santa Cruz. Oh, excuse me, of Santa Cruz. And we worked hard to put a garden there. And we put a garden across the street from Mission San Juan Bautista. And we have other gardens as well. So if we want to take a look at the different types of gardens that we've worked on, um, you can, if you were to take a field trip and go there, you could talk to the people there and learn more.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, essentially just figure out what your organization is looking for and try to pitch the garden from those lenses. I think there's um, a lot of potential there. So there's a question probably for Valentin. The next question: how has this garden impacted or benefited the tribal community over time?
Well, it just brings a lot of attention to the land trust, and it brings a lot of attention to the importance of native plants and that relationship to it. Um, when we were working, we collaborated with the museum a lot in the development of the garden. Um, but because of capacity and such, it's difficult to have a leading role in this.
That brings up a great point, which is, also Valentin, when you were mentioning, you might not get much of a response or capacity can be limited. It's important to recognize your organization's role in supporting your Indigenous communities by taking on stewardship or organization of these projects while also elevating their mission and doing your best to support those organizations through these partnerships. So here at the museum, we're always promoting and elevating AMLT and the Amah Mutsun's mission so that we can make sure that we're collaborating together when we have maybe some more resources than they do at certain times. So it's important to use the power that you have within your organization to try to lift up the communities around you. We have a question about school tours and field trips. When school trips come, is there a staff person to docent the garden area, or is there a teacher's guide? How do you share the information of the gardens with groups? So I work with a fabulous education coordinator. She and I have worked on this garden from the beginning. So it's either she or I giving the tour to the students. So there's always a representative available. All of the staff here at the MA are very familiar with the garden and its mission because I've given many tours to the staff myself. And we take opportunities to take care of the garden together. And it's important that, you know, we all have a hand in stewarding and tending the garden ourselves so that if we ever have to lead a tour outside of the formal education tour structure, that we're able to represent this garden properly. So there is a sign in the garden that tells you about the project and tells you what you're seeing in the garden, but also there's always a MA representative there to be with the children, ask them not to trample the plants, tell them why. We'll give them something to smell. You know, we have yerba buena and coyote mint in the garden, both of which are really fragrant. And, you know, kids really want to get involved. So we have different strategies for, you know, collecting a little bit of something, having people interact with it while also teaching that it's important to try to keep the space clear for the pollinators. That being said, we do have an informational packet that's at the front desk in English and in Spanish, a few different laminated copies that people are invited to take out into the garden that have photos of all the plants with descriptions of the plants and some cultural uses that the Amah Mutsun were comfortable sharing. So if you go to the front desk, it's free of charge, no admission fee to take one of these booklets and go out to the garden. And this was, you know, keeping homeschooled families in mind, keeping school tours in mind, you know, keeping people with children in mind, that there's always a way for them to connect to the garden if there isn't a MA representative available. Let's see. Do you and the AMLT have an agreement about the tribe's access to the garden to collect plants for food and ceremonial uses? Valentin, what do you say to that?
We don't have an agreement for collection, and this is a smaller garden. So for collections, a lot of times we will go out to the open spaces or go to the arboretum for collections. So that's normally where we gather, because when we gather, you know, a lot of times it'll be that we want to make a meal, you know, that, you know, for, you know, 15, 20 people, and there will not be enough resources at this location.
It's a small garden.
Yes.
And because of, you know, what people alluded to earlier with like potential for contamination from all the mystery liquids coming from the bar next door, it's, you know, it's not a reliable, ample source of like fresh, clean food, but it works very well for the pollinators, which is the point. And that's what matters most to us. Let's see. Then, sorry, go ahead, Val.
Well, I was going to say one thing that I was worried about is that, you know, if you bring in a lot of pollinators, that would attract the birds to pick them off for their foods. And also, they can make and leave a mess there. So I was kind of worried about either of those two things happening. You know, you have a small child and a bird comes in and eats a butterfly or something like that. You know, that could potentially be um, traumatic. So that was one of our concerns up front.
Luckily, that hasn't happened.
Mm-hmm.
We have a question about volunteering. So someone was curious if we have volunteer days for this garden, and if so, where do we post our volunteer dates and signups? For the time being, I'm keeping the volunteer pool very small because it is a small garden. But if you want to volunteer, please email me. I would love to work with you. If you're nearby Santa Cruz, I can give you a tour of the garden and show you where you can access some of the tools, teach you a little bit about the plants so that whenever you come in, you can do a little bit of tending. And my email is shanti@santacruzma.org. And I'm going to put it in the chat right now. So if you are interested in volunteering, please let me know. I do have a small group of volunteers, but again, I'm the main steward of this garden, and I'm trying to balance running a volunteer program with also all of my other responsibilities, which is why I've kept the pool small. But I would love more help, so please reach out to me. We have a few more minutes. Does anybody have any more questions for us? It can be anything at all. Yvonne asks, can you speak more about the grant? Yes, we applied for an IMLS grant for this project, and the project was completely funded through this 3-year IMLS grant. So the 2021-2022 was the development stage of the garden, where we were figuring out, where it could go, what kind of plants could be involved, and sort of getting all of these collaborators together to make it happen. And then 2023, we used much of the grant money to hire people to help us remove all of the plants from the garden, the trucks to bring in the new soil, and we bought some plants where needed, and also plenty of tools so that we can support the upkeep in the future. And now that the grant cycle has ended for this grant, we maintain the garden with those same tools that we were able to purchase from the grant, and we allocate a small amount every year when we can for maintenance of the garden, whether that's, me hiring somebody to help weed for a day, or, new soil, new mulch for the space. IMLS stands for the Institute of Museum and Library Services, I believe. And it's
I have to take this, so I'm going to step away. I'm sorry.
Oh, okay, thank you so much. Yeah, IMLS is a primary funder for a lot of museums nationwide and in California. And we got a substantial grant from them so that we could make this project possible. The word kincentricity, so centricity, like centering, and then kin, meaning like family or relatives. So kincentricity put together refers to the Indigenous belief that all things on life are connected, all things on earth are connected, and we are all family, and it's our responsibility to care for one another. So I'll share with you this slide as well about what is kincentricity. And Yvonne, to answer your question a little bit more about the grant, I'm going to give you my email below. And if you're interested to hear a little bit more about the amounts and the logistics, please reach out to me and I can provide you some more details about, that application process. Does anybody have any more questions? Any follow-up questions? I'm all ears. We have a few minutes. Oh, thank you, Tiana, for providing a new link to the Native Plant Guide. I encourage you all to look at this Native Plant Guide. It's a beautiful resource. I think there's going to be a Spanish version produced in the future. Right now, we just have English, but it gives you so much information about native plants in the Santa Cruz coastal area. And also, a lot of these plants you'll recognize if you live in California. All right, final call. Any questions? Again, my name is Shanti Nagwani. I work with the Santa Cruz Museum of Art and History. My email is in the chat. Please reach out with any other questions that you have. I'm happy to talk about this garden. And if you are near the area, if you're ever visiting, please send me an email. I would love to give you a tour. This is such a special project for us, and it's around forever. So please come by and check it out if you're able to.
Thank you, Shanti and Val. That was fantastic. Shanti, like she just said, she put her email in the chat for y'all if you'd like to ask any follow-up questions. If you missed it, you can also email me and I'd be happy to connect you with Shanti. A few things before we head out for the today. We have three more Lunch and Learn programs coming up next July 16th. Then we have July 30th, and then we're running out on August 6th if you're able to join us. Um, Outside of that, we're just grateful for y'all's attendance, and we hope that you found this resource to be helpful for you. And maybe next year at the conference, we might see some of you all with your own native gardens in place. That would be a really nice full circle moment. All right, thank you all so much. Again, if you guys have any lingering questions, just email me or Shanti, and we will be able to answer them for you all. Thank you so much. Have a great day.
Thank you, Tiana.
Of course. Thank you.